welcome to Capitol Hill. I'm Lyndall Curtis. The legislation to hit the pause button on the operations of the Supertrawler was introduced into Parliament on Tuesday, but it hasn't reached the Senate yet. Speaker after speaker was added to the Speaker's list in the House of Representatives as negotiations with the independents, whose votes the government needs, went on behind the scenes. One man who's in front of the scenes again is the former Prime Minister, now Labor backbencher, Kevin Rudd. He has declared that Julia Gillard can win the next election. Joining me to discuss the day are Labor Senator Doug Cameron and Liberal Senator Micaelia Cash. Welcome to you both. Doug, if we could go first to the issue of the Supertrawler. If there's not a problem with the quota, the amount of fish that the Supertrawler is allowed to catch, what is actually the problem with it?
Well, some experts are saying there is a problem with the quota. As I understand it, some of the scientists are saying that there has not been a proper analysis of the fish mass in the area since 1984. Some of the fish are quick-growing fish. Others are longer, live fish, and they take, so they are less likely to come back quickly. So there are scientific issues and scientific debate going on about it.
Micaelia, if there is scientific debate, if there is a question still open about how large the quota should be, how many fish a boat the size of a Supertrawler should be able to catch, that's a reason, isn't it, to stop and take a look at it so policy can be set for the future?
Lyndall, this is a government that actually set this policy when they were elected to govern. The Australian fisheries management is regarded globally as some of the best fisheries management in the world. If the government were worried about the quota, they actually could have brought into the Parliament move-on powers, and we've been very clear we would have supported that. But this is what you are seeing now is government by get-up. Government via an email campaign from a small minority of Australians. When you govern via get-up, you actually introduce yet again into Australia the issue of sovereign risk. This is no longer about the Supertrawler. This is now about investment in Australia, people who have been lawfully invited to this country by the government after many, many years of negotiations, who have come here under the given laws of the land, only to find that when they get here, because a get-up campaign has raised an issue, the government literally overnight changes the rules. That is a very, very dangerous way to govern in Australia.
We'll come to the issues of the way the campaign's been run in the moment. But Doug, is there a question for businesses looking to invest in Australia when they see this sort of action taken, and the action that was taken under the live cattle export trade, that you will be quick to move when a problem arises in the public eye?
Oh, look, this is one of the lines of the day from the coalition, and also they've been running this for some time. They argued that there was sovereign risk in the mining industry. We've got the largest investment in the mining industry of any country in the world. We are seen internationally as the safest place to invest in the mining industry. It's not us that are saying that, it's the actual investment people that are saying this out in the area. And I don't think Professor Jennifer Meevig, I think that's how you say the name, from the University of Western Australia, is on Facebook or emailing. She's a professor in this area, and she's saying there are scientific issues that have to be dealt with, and I think it's appropriate to say, hold on, let's have a look at it. I also think it's appropriate then when Tasmanian senators and Tasmanian members are being approached by their constituency, that they raise that in the caucus has a discussion about it and gives some advice to the executive, and that's exactly what happened.
Micaelia, if I could ask one final question. The government's about the scope of the legislation. The government has amended the legislation, has drastically narrowed the scope of the legislation. So the criticisms the coalition had yesterday that it was going to apply to recreational fishers, that people wouldn't be able to throw a line in the water with any certainty anymore, that's not the case, is it?
Lyndall, but a few days ago, this is a government that supported the Supertrawler. This is a government that has had 3 positions. In fact, I think it's 4 today now that they've brought in the legislation in 4 days. We need, if we're going to properly look at this legislation, we need to sit down and look at it. That opportunity has not been offered to the opposition. A government that but a few days supported the Supertrawler and in 4 days has had 4 positions. Again, you govern by get-up. That is a very, very dangerous game you play.
That's the spin, but anyway.
If I could go on to that way, the different way that politicians can get pressure from the public. Doug, is it something, though, you have seen, particularly around the Supertrawler, but on other issues, that email campaigns are run, and that the pressure on politicians has increased?
I didn't see too much of an email campaign on the Supertrawler compared to other campaigns that the coalition have been out there running the fear campaigns on, such as global warming and climate change. I mean, they were huge. Just one after the other, the same message coming out. Well, you ignore them. Some people write to you in a thoughtful way. Some people raise issues that you may not agree with, but they deal with it thoughtfully. They're entitled to a response, and that's how I deal with it. So
you can afford to ignore a flood of emails when they're just a standard pro forma email.
Not only
just
do I
being
ignore
sent.
them, they don't come into my inbox. I actually get them ditched out in my inbox. So I'd say to people, if you're looking at running this big campaign with me, don't do it. I use the technology to get rid of it.
Micaelia, when do you know when a campaign of that sort is when the emails you're getting are actually representative of what the public thinks?
Look, when you actually read the email and the person has taken the time to write to you personally, then you actually know this person has an issue, they've considered the issue, and they've taken the time to actually write to you. And that person is absolutely deserving of a considered response. When you get thousands, and I think Doug would agree, you can sometimes get thousands of emails that are identical, they don't nearly have the same weight.
Don't have any weight with me.
Because it was one of the factors in pushing the coalition to change its position on emissions trading scheme and change leaders.
And we've been upfront about that. We received thousands of emails from people all over the country saying to us, we do not want an ETS. I'm sure those thousands of people are behind us now saying we don't want a carbon tax because of the individual thousands of emails that we received from people all over Australia. Yes, we changed our policy position, and it is now the position we took to the last election, and it is the position we are taking to this election. There will be no carbon tax.
I had some of the same emails, and if you make policy on some of those emails, you are in real trouble. And I think the coalition will pay a price for ditching the science on climate change, not accepting the scientific position that's there, and Micaelia is one of the worst people in relation to that in the Senate.
We might leave that debate because I'm sure it has the capacity to get heated and go on to the man who perhaps suffered the most out of that leadership change by the coalition, Kevin Rudd. He is back on air last night on 7:30, acknowledging that he thought Julia Gillard could win the next election.
Of course the government can prevail against Mr Abbott at the next election. And that's why I'm supporting
with Julia Gillard as the leader?
Under the Prime Minister's leadership to do so.
Under this Prime Minister's leadership?
Under the Prime Minister's leadership to do so.
Under Prime Minister Julia Gillard?
I just said that. Under Prime Minister Gillard's leadership.
Now, Doug, that was a concession that Kevin Rudd's previously been unwilling to make, saying Prime Minister Gillard, saying the Prime Minister's name. Does that show that he's now back on board, fully willing to contribute to Labor's campaign for re-election?
Well, I don't think there's been any question about that since the last campaign for the leadership. And what he said after that was that he would support the Prime Minister, and that's what he's been doing. He's a very effective communicator out there. He's one of the most popular, and as I said, probably the most popular politician in the country. And I think it's great that he's out there arguing and exposing the nonsense that comes out of the coalition on a whole range of areas. The cutbacks in Queensland in health, the cutbacks in New South Wales in education. These are all areas that we need to get out and talk loudly and clearly about, and he's the guy to do it.
Micaelia, Kevin Rudd has a reputation as a strong campaigner. Labor needs to make up ground in Queensland. There is the potential that if his campaigning strengths are unleashed, that he could drag votes back for Labor because of what Campbell Newman is doing in Queensland.
The coalition will fight the election under the leader that the Labor Party has at the time. If that's under Ms Gillard, we fight it against her. If that's under Mr Rudd, we fight it against him. We know what our role is. Our role is to show the people of Australia that we are willing, ready and able to govern. But I have to say, If you want to talk about Mr Rudd's comeback, his brother Greg is finally on the record, but a few hours ago, and as many would know, Greg is standing as an independent candidate for the Senate, and this is what Greg has said in response to a question about Mr Rudd and whether or not he'll be running again. I could put all sorts of spin around the issue, but basically Kevin's rattling the cage, letting his colleagues know that he is still there, willing to serve if they wish so.
But he is, isn't he, damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. If he doesn't speak up against, say, the cuts Campbell Newman is making, he could be accused by some in the Labor Party of running dead and not contribute to the cause. And if he does speak up, he can be accused of rattling the cage.
Look, there's only one team that poor Mr Rudd plays for, and that is clearly Team Rudd. And good on him. Good on him. He's got his fan in himself. But look, the problem that the coalition has is this. Whilst there is leadership tension in the party between Mr Rudd and Ms Gillard, and whilst they are continuing to square off at one another, they are forgetting to govern the country. This is all about governing Australia. And whilst Ms Gillard and Mr Rudd continue to have those leadership tensions, the country does not get governed. If Mr Rudd wants to yet again run for leader, then do it. Seriously, do it.
Look, the real question here is why should Kevin Rudd be treated any differently from any other politician? I come here, nobody says that this is a leadership issue. Wayne Swan comes on. Any Labour politician that comes on, they're not treated as if there's some terrible, new division in the Labour Party. Kevin Rudd is entitled to, as a strong, effective communicator, get out there and play his part in the team. He's played a team player's role, and the team needs good players, and he's one of them.
So there's no reason for anyone in the Labor Party to be wary of him if he mounts a strong campaign for Labor in Queensland, particularly on the issue of state government cuts.
Well, why would they? And I think it's great that he's up there defending the health system in Queensland, defending workers' rights in Queensland, making sure that Work Choices doesn't come back, making sure that we don't get a government federally that would do exactly the same as the Queensland and New South Wales state governments, cut services in health, cut services in education, and bring back Work Choices.
Now, there were questions in the Parliament in question time about your leader, Tony Abbott. The government was accusing him of being remarkably quiet, saying there was radio silence. He's not been out and about, as he usually is in sitting weeks, campaigning at local businesses against the carbon tax. 2 of the days have been days where there are military funerals, but is there a reason for his silence?
Lyndall, this week was an unusual week in politics. The Prime Minister very sadly lost her father. The Prime Minister has obviously taken time off to grieve, and as a sign of respect, we have not gone after the Prime Minister. In our usual week, I can assure you, and I know the public would know, the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition would go head to head. But certainly, out of respect for the Prime Minister this week, we have chosen not to go after her. And you're also right, this is also an extraordinary week in terms of deaths of those who have served this country. So is Tony Abbott hiding? Absolutely not, but he is showing respect.
This is absolute nonsense. Tony Abbott has not behaved like this in the past. This is a nonsense argument that's there, and it's quite clear that the coalition are hiding because they don't want Tony Abbott asked hard questions.
And that's where we'll have to leave it. Micaelia Cash and Doug Cameron, thank you very much for your time. And thank you for joining Capitol Hill. Be with us at the same time tomorrow.